The day my life changed forever began like any other. I woke up to the usual sound of birds chirping outside my bedroom window, the soft rays of the morning sun gently kissing my face. Little did I know that this ordinary day would soon take a turn into the extraordinary. As I sipped my morning coffee, a letter arrived. It was from the law firm of Anderson Jacobs, and the words on that envelope held a secret that would alter the course of my life. It contained the news that I had inherited a fortune worth $2.05 million from a distant relative I had never even heard of, a wealthy aunt named Margaret. I sat there, clutching the unopened letter, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and curiosity. I couldn't imagine who Aunt Margaret was or why she had left me such an immense sum of money. I racked my brain, trying to recall if I'd ever met her at family gatherings or received any correspondence from her, but there was nothing. With trembling hands, I carefully opened the envelope, revealing a formal letter and legal documents that detailed the inheritance. My eyes scanned the words, each line confirming the astonishing news. I was a beneficiary of Aunt Margaret's vast estate, and the $2.05 million was just the beginning. The estate included properties, investments, and a collection of priceless artwork. I couldn't believe it. I read and reread the documents, half expecting this to be an elaborate prank or a clerical error. But it was real. I'd inherited a fortune that could change my life and the lives of those around me. Overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, disbelief, and even a hint of sadness that I had never known this generous relative, I decided to share the news with my husband, Mark, who was at work. Little did I know that this would set in motion a series of events that would challenge the very foundation of our relationship. My initial reaction was one of shock and disbelief. I mean, who in their right mind would leave such a vast sum to someone they barely knew? I felt like I was living in a dream, and the reality of the situation was slipping through my fingers. After reading the letter and legal documents confirming my inheritance, I paced around the living room, trying to make sense of it all. The room seemed different, as if the very walls held a secret I was only now beginning to uncover. I was a middle-class woman with a modest job, and this sudden windfall was beyond anything I had ever imagined. Unable to contain my excitement, I called my husband Mark, who was at work. His voice crackled over the phone as he answered. I could hear the sounds of a busy office in the background, oblivious to the bombshell I was about to drop. "Mark," I began, my voice quivering with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "You won't believe what just happened." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost picture Mark furrowing his brow in curiosity. "What is it, honey?" he asked, his voice laced with intrigue. I took a deep breath and, with a quiver in my voice, shared the incredible news of the inheritance. I told him about Aunt Margaret, the $2.05 million, and the extensive estate that now belonged to me. There was a moment of stunned silence, and I could almost hear Mark's sharp intake of breath on the other end. Finally, he spoke, his words cautious but filled with surprise. "Are you serious, darling? This can't be real. How did this happen?" I assured him that it was indeed real, and I read out some of the details from the documents to support my claim. The shock in Mark's voice was palpable as he grappled with the enormity of the situation. For a brief moment, it felt like we were partners in a grand adventure, ready to take on the world together with this newfound wealth. But little did I know that Mark's reaction would soon take a turn that I had never anticipated, setting the stage for the tumultuous events that would follow. When I told Mark about the inheritance, he didn't respond with joy or even congratulations. Instead, his voice grew cold and he demanded, "Hand over the money." I was taken aback, to say the least. Was this the man I had married? The one I thought I knew so well? The silence on the phone stretched as I tried to process his words. "Hand over the money," I repeated, my voice trembling with disbelief. Mark's tone remained unyielding. "Yes, hand it over now that it's rightfully ours." I was dumbfounded. "Mark, this isn't ours in the sense you're implying. It's an inheritance left to me by my aunt, Margaret. I don't think we should jump to conclusions or make any hasty decisions." His response was curt, his impatience palpable. "Don't be naive, darling. We're married, and what's yours is mine, and vice versa. We can enjoy this money together." I struggled to find the words to express my growing unease. But Mark, Aunt Margaret left this money specifically to me. It's not a joint inheritance. Besides, she was my relative, not yours. The conversation grew increasingly tense as Mark insisted that we should have full access to the funds. He talked about all the things we could do, the lavish vacations we could take, and the lifestyle we could enjoy. It was a side of him I had never seen before, a side driven by an insatiable desire for wealth and comfort. I knew I needed time to process everything, to understand the implications of this inheritance fully. But Mark's impatience and insistence weighed heavily on me. His reaction raised questions about our relationship and the values that had once bound us together. As we continued to argue, it became clear that the inheritance had unearthed a side of Mark I had never known, a side that prioritized money above all else. I was left grappling with the realization that our marriage was about to face one of the most significant challenges it had ever encountered. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of Mark's words. Was he joking? But his tone was deadly serious, I stammered. What do you mean? Hand over the money? Mark's demand hung in the air, leaving me in stunned silence. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line, heavy and impatient. It felt as though the ground had shifted beneath me, and I was struggling to find my footing. After what seemed like an eternity, I managed to gather my thoughts. Mark, we need to talk about this face to face. It's not something we should decide over the phone. His response was terse. Fine, we'll talk when I get home. But be prepared to discuss how we're going to use that money for our future. The call ended, and I was left with a mix of emotions, shock, confusion, and a gnawing sense of unease. The once strong foundation of our marriage had been shaken, and I wasn't sure how to navigate this newfound rift. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter from Aunt Margaret's attorney still in my hand, as I contemplated the road ahead. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the changes it would bring to our relationship and the unspoken expectations that now loomed over us. Mark's demand had left me wondering if I truly knew the man I had married, and if the love and trust we had built over the years could withstand the weight of this unexpected inheritance. As the days passed, tension simmered between Mark and me. The inheritance had exposed a side of him I had never seen before. He became obsessed with the idea of possessing the $2.05 million, and our once loving relationship began to unravel. We argued constantly, our disagreements centering on how to handle the inheritance. Mark was adamant that we should use the money to pay off his mounting debts and buy a larger, more luxurious home. He saw it as a ticket to a life of extravagance, one that we had never known before. I, on the other hand, felt a sense of responsibility to Aunt Margaret's legacy. I believed that she had left me this fortune for a reason, and I wanted to use it wisely, perhaps even to make a positive impact in her memory. This fundamental difference in our perspectives drove a wedge between us that seemed insurmountable. Our once peaceful home became a battlefield of heated arguments and icy silences. We no longer laughed together, and the warmth that had defined our relationship had turned cold and distant. Friends and family noticed the change, and it weighed heavily on us. I found myself questioning the very foundation of our marriage. Was this man, who now seemed consumed by greed, the same person I had married years ago? What had happened to the love, trust, and shared dreams that had once bound us together? It was during this tumultuous period that I realized our relationship was facing a critical juncture. The inheritance had exposed deep-seated differences and flaws in our marriage that could no longer be ignored. It was a painful realization, and I knew that difficult decisions lay ahead. As I contemplated the uncertain future, I couldn't help but wonder if we could find a way back to the love and harmony we had once shared, or if our paths had diverged irreparably. In an attempt to salvage our relationship, I decided to have an open and honest conversation with Mark. We sat down one evening, the tension in the room palpable, and I asked him why he was so insistent on getting his hands on the inheritance. With a heavy sigh, Mark finally revealed his secret. He had been in deep financial trouble, buried under a mountain of debt that he had hidden from me for months. The inheritance, he believed, was the solution to all his problems. "I'm single, though," I replied, the words escaping my lips before I could stop them. I meant it as a reminder that the money was legally mine, but it only seemed to stoke the flames of our conflict. Mark's face darkened, and his voice grew defensive. "We're married, and what's yours is mine, right? Besides, we're a team, and we should be helping each other out in times of need." I understood the importance of supporting one another in a marriage, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark's motives were driven more by self-interest than by a desire to work together as a team. His revelation left me torn between compassion for his financial struggles and a growing concern about his approach to our marriage. A conversation ended with a sense of unresolved tension, and I retreated to our bedroom, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I knew that we needed to find a way forward, but I wasn't sure if we could bridge the gap that had emerged between us. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder if the love and trust we had once shared could survive the weight of financial strain and the complexities of this unexpected inheritance. Listening to Mark's confession, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and sympathy. I was hurt that he hadn't trusted me enough to share his financial struggles, but I also understood the desperation that had driven him to make that demand. The days that followed were marked by a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, Mark's revelation had brought us closer as he began to open up about his financial predicament. We discussed his debts, the mounting pressure he felt, and the fear that had driven him to make such a bold demand regarding the inheritance. I, in turn, shared my concerns about the inheritance and my desire to honor Aunt Margaret's legacy in a meaningful way. We talked late into the night, trying to find common ground and a path forward that could preserve our marriage. However, the financial strain and the weight of the inheritance continued to hang over us like a dark cloud. Mark's debt was substantial, and it was clear that the inheritance could provide a solution. But I remained steadfast in my belief that it should be used judiciously and responsibly. We consulted financial advisors and marriage counselors, hoping to find a compromise that would address Mark's financial troubles while also respecting my desire to preserve Aunt Margaret's legacy. It was a challenging process that pushed both of us to our limits, testing the strength of our marriage in ways we had never imagined. As we grappled with the complexities of our situation, it became increasingly clear that our love alone might not be enough to overcome the obstacles that lay ahead. The inheritance had brought us to a crossroads, and the decisions we would make in the coming weeks would determine the fate of our marriage and the legacy we would leave behind. Our marriage reached a breaking point. Mark's relentless pursuit of the inheritance had shattered the trust we had once shared. I knew I had a decision to make, one that would redefine my life. As the weeks passed, the tension between us escalated. Arguments became a daily occurrence, and the stress of our situation took a toll on both our emotional and physical well-being. The strain was becoming unbearable, and it seemed that every attempt at compromise or reconciliation only led to more frustration. I found solace in late-night conversations with close friends and confidants who offered advice and support. They reminded me that my aunt's inheritance was a gift meant for me, and I shouldn't be pressured into decisions that didn't align with my values and intentions. During this difficult time, I consulted with lawyers to ensure my rights were protected. They emphasized that the inheritance was legally mine, and Mark had no grounds to claim it as his own. However, the legal aspect of our situation added another layer of complexity to an already strained relationship. I began considering the possibility of a life without Mark, something I had never imagined before. It was a painful process filled with uncertainty and heartache. We had shared so much together, dreams, memories, and a vision for our future, but the inheritance had driven a wedge between us that seemed insurmountable. The breaking point came during a particularly heated argument when Mark's desperation turned into an ultimatum. He demanded access to the inheritance, threatening to leave if I didn't comply. It was a painful and heart-wrenching moment, one that forced me to confront the reality that our marriage might be irreparably damaged. I made the difficult decision to separate from Mark, understanding that our relationship had been irrevocably changed by the inheritance. It was a heart-wrenching choice, filled with grief and uncertainty about the future. As I packed my belongings and prepared to move out, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making the right decision, or if I was sacrificing the love we had shared for the sake of a fortune that had brought nothing but turmoil and discord into our lives. In the end, I chose to prioritize my own well-being and future. I made the difficult decision to separate from Mark, understanding that our relationship had been irrevocably changed by the inheritance. As I embarked on a new chapter of my life, I couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of events that had unfolded since that fateful letter had arrived. The moment I inherited a $2.05 million fortune had not only brought financial security, but also an unexpected journey of self-discovery and independence. Leaving behind the home we had shared for years was emotionally challenging. Memories of happier times and the love we had once shared seemed to linger in every room. I had to remind myself that this decision was necessary for my own well-being and the preservation of my aunt's legacy. The legal process of dividing our assets and settling our separation was complicated and emotionally draining. The inheritance, once a source of excitement and wonder, had become a symbol of the rift that had torn apart our marriage. During this transitional period, I sought therapy to help me navigate the emotional fallout of our separation. It was a process of healing and rediscovering myself, one that required time and patience. As I adjusted to my new life, I also began to explore how I could use the inheritance to honor Aunt Margaret's memory. I researched charitable causes and organizations that aligned with her values and interests, determined to ensure that her legacy would be one of kindness and compassion. While the end of my marriage had been painful, it also marked the beginning of a journey towards self-discovery and personal growth. I reconnected with old friends and pursued hobbies and interests that I had neglected during the tumultuous period of our marriage. Life was uncertain, and the path ahead was filled with both challenges and opportunities. But I faced it with a newfound sense of resilience and determination, knowing that the moment I inherited that $2.05 million fortune had not only reshaped my financial future, but also paved the way for a journey of self-renewal and the pursuit of a life true to my own values and aspirations.